Hello, good afternoon and welcome ladies and gentlemen to another round of thrilling racing action in the middle of the pack Racing League Winter GR86 Championship for 2025 as proudly brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC known as iRacing. Today we take a look back at all the racing actions if it were live from round 7 and 8 at the Homestead-Miami Speedway in the United States of America. A circuit which originated and opened in 1995 as part of the recovery program for the city of Homestead following the worst hurricane in the state's history of Hurricane Andrew. This venue has seen multiple layouts over the course of its extensive history, whether it be at the more common oval, which is featured primarily on NASCAR, or the infield layout starting off with Road Course A, which we'll see our drivers take to today, or perhaps more preferable at Road Course B, which is featured on a more modern format of racing. Well, this is a circuit where it's gradually taken some time to become popular, but since its growing popularity, it has proven to be, whether it's oval racing or road racing, a circuit that's highly popular with fans both domestically and around the globe. With its Road Course A spanning 2.21 miles and consisting of 12 corners, it's a unique roval for our Roval Cup circuits over the course of the second half of this season, in the fact it makes very little use of the oval banking compared to most of them. Instead, the focus is all on using what is the back straight and the start-finish straight, and bringing together an absolute medley of stop-start style corners, particularly hairpins in the infield, in order to create plenty of overtaking opportunities and make it so the racing never quite lets up from start to finish, or indeed from lights out to check a flag. But this does mean that things will be finding points on the precipice, and the fact that going into our season finale in a week's time, we do have a championship leader in the Pro class in the form of James Logsdon, and in the Am class of Nick Bader, both of which could be running away with things after today if results go their way. But this circuit is going to encourage as many overtaking opportunities as possible, and it could be an opportunity for their rivals to strike back before the season finale in a week's time. But for all that and more, we welcome you to this live broadcast of the circuit side, and indeed you could be tuning in via one of two media platforms for your viewing pleasure. First, you could be tuning in via YouTube at youtube.com and search for TX11TX, alternatively Paul Walsh, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via YouTube. Or secondly, you could be tuning in via Twitch at twitch.tv/TX11, and welcome to you guys and girls tuning in via Twitch, including their divide_rule, and I hope you're all doing well. In the commentary booth, you have myself. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX11, or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And we bring you all your racing action as it unfolds. And to come back to earlier, this is a post-round broadcast, whereby this broadcast is live, but the racing action you're going to be seeing on screen today isn't quite live. It occurred earlier this week on Wednesday, the 19th of March. We're bringing it to you as if it were live this fine Saturday at the 22nd of March, 2025. As speaking of our schedule for today, times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Chrono Time, UTC. We'll see in just under, will be 11 minutes time. We're making our way out onto circuit for our qualifying session at 5:15 this evening for 15 minutes of qualifying action. After which, with the lap set, our drivers will be making their way to the grid for our 30-minute sprint race, the final sprint race of the season at 5:30 today, because of course in a week's time we have our feature race finale, and we'll plenty to look forward to there, but we've got plenty to look forward to today. An absolutely scorching circuit with track temperature standing in excess of 45 degrees centigrade as it currently stands, and an ambient temperature close to 30 degrees centigrade. It is going to be a hot one, but we are always big fans of hot and fast and furious action in the Toyota GR86 Cup cars. But of course, to regale you of the story so far and what we've still got lying in wait, then, well, let's take a quick look back at our calendar as it has played out. The Free Content Cup made up the first 4 rounds, and they ran from the 29th of January all the way through to 19th of February, seeing our drivers take to a number of circuits on the European continent. But since then, for rounds 5 onwards, we've been in the Roval Cup, the second half of the season. We started off at the Phoenix Raceway, the 2008 Legacy layout, on the 5th of March. Last time out, we continued our time in the United States of America, but made our way to North Carolina for the Charlotte Motor Speedway, and that was on the 12th of March, and what a round of racing that was. A back and forth battle all the way from start to finish between John Lauzon and James Logsdon in the Pro class, and a runaway drive for Nick Bader in the Am class, but it really was the battle for the top 2 spots at the front of the field that kept us all absolutely glued to our TV screens from start to finish. And could we see more of that today? Because today, of course, is the Miami round, and after today, well, our season finale will be at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the 26th of March, and there we will have a full reverse grid feature race finale. And could we see some absolute chaos there before the dust settles? Well, we'll have to wait and see. But still, 2 rounds to go, one of which today in our penultimate round. And going into our penultimate round, well, let's regale you with the championship standings as well. And here they tell a story. We start off with the overall Drivers' Championship standings, in the Pro class in particular. And we see James Logsdon holds an advantage now of 27 points over John Lauzon after his 4th win of the season last week. And right now, it does look as though Logsdon has restored control over his championship, albeit then again, it only would take one result from Lauzon in order to take that control away. And can we see the breakfast for dinner driver potentially assert that over the Bear Pope Zero driver today? Well, that is going to be his target. Edward, our friend, meanwhile, sits in P3. 90's not too far out of the hunt, and we can expect plenty as well from the number 99 driver, as he's still an ever-present threat. He's got a 10-point advantage over Shahi Zaher, who's put in some brilliant performances in the last couple of rounds, and he's not to be ruled out in a fight for third place, with George Louise in P5 and 194 points after a difficult time last time out at Charlotte, but ahead by 20 points over Julian Jones. And it's Tom Bryce, Kyle Rise, David Addy, and Aaron Law who complete your Pro Top 10. And last but not least, sitting in P11, best of the rest, is Aaron Tiggott. We then come onto the AM class, and here we can see the complexion is a little bit similar. Nick Bader leads the way by 21 points over Blake Phillips. Bader has been the man to beat, and indeed the performances continue to come. The hits keep on coming, as they say, for Nick Bader, and could he potentially put this championship to rest before the season finale? Well, to do so, he's going to need an absolutely brilliant result, and it's going to need to be a cataclysmic result for his main championship rival of Blake Phillips, who's here today. He wasn't on the grid last time out at Charlotte, but there is one drop score this season which needs to be factored for, and Roger Ganesh meanwhile sitting a further 14 points behind, of course, the star of Phoenix. I mean, the man who rose from the ashes. Could Ganesh find a way in order to move into P2 by the end of today? Glenn Bratton sits in P4, only by 11 points over Billman da Costa. Their fight continues to go to the wire. A third point behind is the slipstream driver of Nick Yakubov, and we have Carl Peterson a third point behind. There's the fight to be the last of the top 5 drivers continues to intensify between our three of da Costa, Yakubov, and Peterson. And then we have Mark Senegal a further 14 points back after a frustrating day in the office at what was our circuit last time out at Charlotte, whereby I think there was more in the tank, but he couldn't quite deploy it and go hunting after Nick Bader. And then we see Marlon Brandel and Jermaine Warren completing the top 10 of the AMs, with Jason Seelin and Navra Kumar outside the top 10, but the last of our runners down 27 and 25 points apiece. And then coming on to the Teams Championship, Bear Pope Zero continue to hold on to their lead, now standing at the best part there, if my mathematics is correct, of what is 92 points, and then in fact 98 points, let's do the mathematics correct, and therefore it is all going to come down to the final margins between the two of them. And in fact, it is 92 points. We were right the first time as I do my mental maths again, but the key point being here, with a gap that's close to the best part of 100 points, Bear Pope Zero right now, we're feeling very confident in terms of being able to hold on versus IT West Interns Pro Esports Division and their sister team of IT West Senior Vice Presidents. And indeed, it looks so the battle for P2 and the battle to be the best of the IT West teams is really going to be the big quotient that we look to work for over the last 2 rounds. But saying that, Sunday GT Turtles, they're on a rise, and they've moved into P4 on 330 points. They're only 10 off of P3. Could they suddenly be the late bloomers that take away IT West's opportunity to be runners-up with either one of their teams? Well, that's going to be a big question that we could have a bit of an answer to today. But meanwhile, in terms of other answers, we need Le Pit Club Sim Racing sit P5 on 199 points, 15 ahead of Slipstream Sloths, with Caboose Crew there in P7 on 159 points, and the fight to be at the bottom end of the top 5 also stays strong between the 3 teams. And then coming on to the Cup Championship standings, and this is for the Roval Cup, of course, so this is for the last 4 rounds of the Championship, starting with round 5, and all the points will be counted from round 5 through to round 8. James Logston leads now by 6 points over John Lauzon, and the fact that Logston has had the upper hand for the first 2 rounds compared to his rival, and it all started with their altercation at Phoenix, but last time out it was an absolutely fair and full fight between the two of them all the way at Charlotte, but Logston was the one to come out on top in the end, despite Lauzon leading the majority of the race. Shahi Zaher sits a further 6 behind, Ian P3 on 82 points, 11 ahead of Tom Bryce, and with Edwin Offrey missing last week's round, it means it falls to P5, ahead of George Louise and Julian Jones, both on 38 points apiece. And then comes the AM class, and Roger Ganesh leads by only 2 points over Nick Bader. But remember, Ganesh leading right now, a lot of that is down to his consistency, and in particular, that absolutely Herculean performance at what was at Phoenix. We absolutely did with that overall pole position, the first ever achieved by an AM driver in the Middle of the Pack Racing League's history, or at least in all 3.5 years that I've been covering Middle of the Pack Racing League series, and indeed a result whereby he took P3 overall as well. A huge points injection, was almost matched by Nick Bader last time out of Charlotte, where he qualified P2 overall, and in the end took the victory, and with it, what a stellar driver it was to P3. So for Bader saying to Ganesh, whatever you can do, I can match it too. And then Glenn Bratton and Nick Yakubov are fighting for the spoils in P3, both with 69 points apiece, but Glenn Bratton ahead based on result countback. It's a third point to Carl Peterson, a further 2 points to Billman da Costa, so that fight for third place absolutely intensifying. Then Mark Senegal and Blake Phillips bring out the rear there, P7 and P8 respectively. And coming on to our circuit for today, as we mentioned earlier, it'll be the road course layout of the Homestead-Miami Speedway, located in the city of Homestead in what is the county of Miami-Dade in the US state of Florida. Available at iRacing.com for their brilliant simulator and the track maps that come available with it. And as we can see here, much like what we talked about earlier, this course of its 2.21 mile length uses very little of the oval layout of the Speedway. In fact, the only parts of the oval that are used are what is the back stretch and also the starting stretch, and a little bit of the banking coming onto the starting stretch. As a result here, this is going to be very much focused on the infield racing all the way through and through, and you'll notice it's a very stop-start style circuit, and the fact that we do have there what is the best part when you do at the maths: 3 hairpin corners, 1 rapid-fire chicane towards the end of the lap, and a number of sweepers, and a very wide open road racing surface throughout. So put it all together, and that means we could see overtaking opportunities come at each and every corner, and that's what's going to keep it intriguing from start to finish. But going on to our rules, because we can't go racing without them. Setup-wise, drivers running a fixed setup as provided by the Middle of the Pack Racing League Administration, with fuel loads restricted to 27.3 litres. In terms of qualifying, an open qualifying format shall be used, lasting 15 minutes. We're split into 2 equal halves, where we'll see the AMs take to the field for the first half of the session. They'll take the first 7.5 minutes, and in the second half of the session, it will be the pros. In the sprint race, the race shall start by a standing start, as it's a tradition of the GR86 Championship. We each try and have 1 fast repair available, and should they pick up 15 or more instant points for contacts and off tracks, then we will be seeing a drive-through penalty awarding that must be served within a good couple of laps. Well, that's enough rules, regulation, everything in between. We're all here for the racing, so therefore let's get back to circuit side, and we're not too far away from going into what will be our qualifying session, as we do see there Mark Senegal making his way past the palm trees. He weaves his way there into turn number 9, and then coming into left-hand sweeper turn number 10. Perhaps the most difficult part of the circuit there being what is the last 4 corners, and how quickly you come charging down over the commencement of the oval banking in towards where it's turns 9 and then 10, and then to segue your way for turns 11 and 12 at the chicanes, complete lap and start it all over again. But I get the feeling here, given the fact that Lauzon and Logsdon separated by 3 tenths at the top of the practice standings right now, and offer a further what is almost 3 tenths behind, and a further 4 tenths to Nick Bader, where it is going to be the big question: will it be Lauzon or Logsdon on pole position, and then who out the 2 of them will be coming home with that checkered flag? And the one thing is, you can never count out this man, Edwin Offray, in the number 99. And the fact he may not have been the fastest driver this season, but one thing we have seen, he may not be the fastest over a single lap, but his racecraft and his consistency have rewarded him time and time again, and given him prime opportunities to try and steal away victories from his rivals. And of course, taking his first victory of the season at Phoenix, where he found himself in that freeway battle between himself, Lauzon, and Logsdon. And in the end, it was an altercation between Lauzon and Logsdon that enabled him to just simply take the lead and run away with it. But sometimes you've got to be the patient driver and let your rivals take each other out of contention, and that could be where the greatest reward will be. As he makes his way in towards turn number 9, we look forward to seeing how he's going to get on today, indeed many of our drivers. But let's not just talk about where's our pro drivers, let's also talk a little bit more about our AMs. We talked a little bit about Mark Senegal earlier as he makes his way through. Currently the 2nd place of our AM drivers in this practice session, looking quite fast out there by 3 tenths over Glenn Bratton, and indeed a 10th behind Nick Bader, who's not quite out on circuit at this time, but he is parked up in the pit lane. And there you can see him in what is the wonderful light blue machine as he gets himself set there, and I think just calming his nerves in the pit lane and get himself ready to go. And you can understand exactly why, in the fact that I think for Bader it is all going to be about just keeping his head down today, and then if he can pull off another win here, then he pretty much puts one hand on the trophy, the overall Drivers' Championship crown, going into what will be Indianapolis in a week's time. Of course, he'll still need to turn up and deliver a result, at least deny his rivals the right to a good result, but it does take that little bit of mental pressure off if you go into the season finale knowing you don't have to do as much as your rivals do, and it's a very nice place to be in. Meanwhile, Roger Ganesh, who's out there right now, well, he will be just thinking about one thing, which is how high can I go over the course of this season, as he makes his way on through at turns 4 and 5, and as he makes his way onto the first main stretch at the centre of the circuit before coming in towards the turn 6 hairpin. We're heading into that braking zone very shortly, and we'll very shortly, ladies and gentlemen, with only 20 seconds left on the clock before we do transition to the qualifying session. Don't be fooled if it does sit at the top center of your screen that we've got 2 hours and 15 minutes of practice, of which we've only completed 1 hour and 15 minutes almost. That was a little bit of an administrative error, but we will be fast forwarding from practice to qualifying very shortly. The fact we're going to do so right now, as the checker flag does come out in this practice session, it is time for qualifying, ladies and gentlemen, and we will be right back for all the qualifying action. And as qualifying gets underway, it is go, go, go for the AMs. First and foremost, as it always is, 7.5 minutes. Who could put it on pole out of the AMs, and how high can they stretch their lap times versus the pros? Well, for all that and more, we're about to find out, as Mark Senegal being one of the first drivers to make his way out of the pit lane. In fact, the very first to make his way out, so a quick exit there, and he'll be happy with that. He's got plenty of clear circuit in front. Now, it'll be interesting to see exactly how this qualifying session plays out, because time and time again, what we have seen over the last couple of rounds in these Roval rounds, or indeed in the Roval Cup, is the fact fact that typically if you pick up a good toe, it is going to give you a few tenths of a second over the entirety of the qualifying lap, and those few tenths are going to be absolutely invaluable in terms of putting you further up the order. Particularly we have seen in the Pro class, perhaps less so in the AM class. But to be fair, going for the slipstream over the course of the lap, that has its own risks as well as rewards, and we've talked about the rewards, but what about the risks? And one of the biggest risks is if you end up behind a driver who you try to use as your slipstream drafting magnet, and in the end they end up being a bit slow over the entirety of the lap, and too slow, alternatively you get too close to them before the end of the lap, you can end up becoming compromised. And we did see that happen to a couple of our pro drivers over the distance of qualifying at Charlotte. So therefore I think right now everyone's going to be thinking about what's the best way to do things. We've got a very big run wide there for Glenn Bratton as he does eventually rejoin, albeit rejoining via the oval banking, and instead opt in to take a long way around as we see Carl Peterson there leaping in front. But this circuit, a very tricky one to get right in the fact that there is a big emphasis on the infield section, whereas in a number of other ovals you normally do have a bit more of an emphasis with regards to what is the combination of the oval and also the infield layout. So here with the whole emphasis really being on the infield, it does mean this is going to feel more like what will be a road racing circuit on the European continent rather than one that's inside a speedway oval. But as we do see our first flying laps get underway, including Carl Peterson here goes on to one, and Glenn Bratton just behind him, Nick Bader as well. He's going to be one of the last AMs who's left the pit lane, so he's leaving it quite late in this qualifying session. But then again, he'll be hoping that his rubbers lay down some rubber for him up ahead of him, and therefore he can really maximise his time out there. We've also got a very warm circuit here today, and we did mention earlier the fact that track temperature in excess of 40 degrees centigrade, all the way up to what's 47 degrees centigrade as recorded in the practice session. Why is that important? Well, when you do have a scorching hot track surface, it means that qualifying times normally are a bit slower compared to cooler conditions, but more importantly, it does mean, whereas normally in qualifying sessions we have seen our drivers be able to get the most out of their tyre compound over the entire qualifying session distance, in the fact they're not allowed to change the fuel load in the car. They are locked in with those 27.3 litres when they start qualifying, so the whole aim of the game is essentially to burn the fuel out of the car and get multiple qualifying laps in, and your best lap in theory will come towards the end of the qualifying session when you've got less fuel in the car, the tyres are still have got plenty of life in them. When you've got a very warm track surface, the problem is, yes, you can keep doing those qualifying laps, but if you push the tyres too soon, then you end up taking the life out of the tyre, because the excessive track temperature means that you lose a lot of the life in the tyre much more quickly than expected. So that is going to be the whole balancing game here that our drivers are going to need to play. And the fact is, do they go all in on those early qualifying laps of a heavier car, or do they perhaps get in a good banker lap or two and then decide, okay, we're going to go around the circuit, cool things down a little bit, but burn some fuel out of the car and then go all in at the end of qualifying. So we may see our qualifying times start off reasonably well, perhaps there'll be a bit of a lower of improvement, and on the final flying laps at each of our classes, that's where we'll see the true time, whereas we've normally seen a natural evolution as each lap ticks up. As we see Nick Bader there absolutely striking hot on the iron with a 36.989, getting a bit of a distant toe there and a very close toe towards the end of the lap off of the back of what was at Glenn Bratton, so he's going to be absolutely pleased as punch with that. In fact, I do believe that I should correct myself, that was Carl Peterson he tucked into the tough and then backed off into turn at number one, but Bader immediately being able to lay down the gauntlet, and that is the perfection in terms of when you get the toe and get it right off of a driver. He picked it up going on through turn 10 all the way through in towards what's the start finish line, if not earlier on, and it has worked out a treat there for Nick Bader, no doubt about it, as he now makes his way in towards turn number 6. But as he comes on down there, well, meanwhile Roger Ganesh very close behind at the time of his teammate and rival Mark Senegal, only 400s between the two of them, and Senegal delivering an absolutely brilliant lap as well. So therefore Sunday GT Turtles in this AM class looking strong as they always do, and I think really prioritising an opportunity to finish inside the top 3 in the teams championship, as well as potentially strike high and take what would be placements in the top 3 of the AM overall championship. Of course, Ganesh here with the mindset of trying to chase down Bader for what is the AM Cup crown in the Roval Cup, or he's going to need to finish ahead of Bader here, because if Bader picks up where's the pole lap, they'll put them on parity, and then he's got to do the hard work of at least getting the fastest lap in the race in order to try and chip some points away from Bader. Well, indeed, he'll want to try and finish ahead of him where possible, because remember, points are scored first and foremost based on overall position, and then you gain bonus points in the AM class where you finish on the podium, whether it's 3 for first, 2 for second, or 1 for third. But meanwhile, we had a bit of an incident there, I believe. Mark Senegal's had to tow to the pits after a big spin coming out of the final corner. We didn't quite catch that on camera. We saw the aftermath as Ganesh does improve for a brief moment, but meanwhile, as Bader crossed that timeline, does he improve? Well, we'll have to wait and see. No, he doesn't, but let's jump on board for a flying lap then. with your visual pulses to Nick Bader as he makes his way into turn 1 so close to the wall, and then onto the brakes here, going down fourth gear to third as he bounces over the apex curve at turn number 2. Up into 3 goes, the first hairpin, if you will, and as he comes down towards first gear, nice and tight to the apex, brings the car to the left-hand side to open up turn 4, balance the throttle there in second gear, higher gear gives him the ability to put the throttle in much more aggressively as he comes out of 5. Now he'll run his way all the way down towards turn 6. A bit of breathing room here for a brief moment, as Blake Phillips, meanwhile, goes second fastest now to 37.055, only half a tenth off of Bader's time, but hard on the brakes goes Bader all the way down to first gear. The nice early apex there, using the flow of the road and the curb to pull the car around, and now with the preload differential absolutely maximised and taking the toe over Carl Peterson, who backs off. Well, Bader will have gained a little bit of speed as he makes his way in towards what is the turn 9 hairpin, in fact the turn 8 hairpin, coming onto the brakes as he comes all the way down from 5th gear to 1st gear, and will exit the corner, an apex of what was 42 miles an hour, and now roaring his way on out, all the way now on towards the back stretch, and you'll see just lazily letting the car come over to the right hand side, straight lining the steering as much as possible to maximise the amount of speed he builds up. And then coming into turn 9, dropping down off the initial oval banking, bouncing his way over the apex curve at turn number 9, flat out all the way, then hard on the brakes there, about 100 meters of corner apex, down to 3rd gear. It's all balanced now. Bring the car over to left to open up the turn 11-12 chicane, down to 2nd gear, hold off the throttle, back on the throttle immediately, use the change in road camber there in order to force the car through as he heads towards the timeline. Can Bader improve this time around? We'll have to see. It's been an aggressive lap, but for Nick Bader, it's not an improvement. He's got 30 seconds left on the clock. He will be allowed one more qualifying lap. What can Blake Phillips do? Because Phillips is now starting to come alive as well. Will Phillips be able to get another lap in? It's going to be very close here for the 225 driver, who is looking very strong in this qualifying session, it must be said. And we did miss him massively at Charlotte last time out, and well, here he's all back and forward firing all cylinders. He heads towards the timeline. He will squeeze in one more lap with 10 seconds left on the clock, and therefore he will be allowed to do the next lap. He doesn't improve this time around, a 37.489, so therefore I think he's saving it all up for one last charge as he makes his way through turn 1 into 2. But will he able to be doing what he needs in order to get a pole? And the answer is he runs wide there. That's not going to help him whatsoever as he comes out of turn 2 in towards 3. And therefore for Phillips at this point, I think this might be a lap now where it's all just all about doing a bit of reconnaissance rather than being able to improve on the lap time, because after you run wide at turn 2, you're going to lose a lot of time in the first sector, and Phillips may struggle to try and get that time back. Definitely on a set of tyres that are getting warmer and warmer, and I can imagine right now the feeling is going to be for Phillips that things are not going his way whatsoever. But as he comes out to turn number 6 in towards 7, of course he'll still feel happy that he's going to be lined up quite close to Bader, but how close is he going to be? That will be the big question mark in his mind, as meanwhile the majority of AM drivers now into the pit lane. They're not improving on their current laps, albeit Billman da Costa is improving. He's making his way into turn 10 currently as he makes his way left into right and then left again in towards the exit chicane as he makes way out of the infield and on towards the banking, and as he does so bounces up there. What's this going to be for da Costa, who's improved in the second half of the lap? Well, Bader raises the pole time to a 36.896. Meanwhile, da Costa goes P4. It's a 37.648. A nice lap there for Billman da Costa and leaving it all to last gasp. But to be fair, if that's what it takes to do it, then fair play to Billman da Costa. He's showing that he can get a good lap out of the car, and that puts him ahead of Mark Senegal, who's qualified P5, as meanwhile Blake Phillips comes into the pit lane, and that will be the AM qualifying session complete, ladies and gentlemen. And in at the end, it does look as though it's Nick Bader who has set the pace by 1.5 tenths over Blake Phillips. But now we must come onto the pro session, and the fact that our AMs seem to be decided. But what about the pros? Can James Logston put it on pole once again, or will it be John Lauzon who finds himself on pole, or could we see Edwin Offrey take a pole position, or will it be somebody else this time? In the fact that statistically, those three drivers have shared all of the pole positions. In fact, I really think it comes down to Logston and Lauzon, unless my memory does not serve me correctly. In fact, I don't think Onofre has taken an overall pole position so far this season, or a pro class pole position, I should say. Albeit, I'm sure somebody will correct me there in the YouTube or Twitch comments if I've got that wrong. I think all the pro pole positions have gone to Logston, Auto's Lauzon so far this season. But could we see a turn in the form as Logston goes on to his first flying lap? And we do expect these initial qualifying times on the pros to be somewhere around the middle to top times of the AMs, and then on the second flying lap, that's where they'll start to really build up some speed. Although saying that, Shahi Zahair absolutely flying right now in the first sector, and well, As he comes through turn 6 into turn 7, he has got the distant toe of the Bear Pope car, I believe, unless I'm mistaken. That is Aaron Tigert in front of him, and therefore for Zuhair, he'll be very happy to be ticking up that toe, and that's going to give him every little bit of pace he makes way through. As unfortunately, I'm hearing George Louise's car in the pit lane right now, not quite able to get out there, out of the circuit. We'll hope to see him in the race, as Tigert runs very wide there, and well, that's an uncharacteristic error from Tigert, and that is going to release Zuhair, albeit Zuhair will lose the opportunity to take a bit of a draft as he makes his way up onto the back straight banking. As he makes his way onto it and then shortly off it, we can see Tigert has rejoined. And now it's going to be Zuhair trying to do everything under his own steam, as Edwin Offrey, meanwhile, makes his way on through at turn 10 in towards 11 and 12, as he makes his way right into left here. He'll be the first pro to get a time on the board in the 99. It's been a good lap from what I'm hearing and looking at his timing, but what exactly is it going to be for an offer as he comes across the timeline? It is going to be provisional pole position of 36.762, so these pros absolutely lighting up the timing screens. And meanwhile, what about Lauzon? Zuhair goes 6th fastest. Meanwhile, Bryce goes 10th, Tigert 11th. And as he comes on through, turn number 10 in towards 11 and 12, well, behind him, that is Julian Jones, and Jones following on through. Well, Logston's going to be the first of the two arrivals to make the way across the line, and Logston's first time on the board is going to be a 37.463. Lauzon, meanwhile, comes across the timeline, and it's a 36.241, half a second faster than anybody out there so far. Well, to be fair, we've still got a few more laps in this pro session to contend with, but John Lauzon there pretty much saying, right, if anyone wants to beat me today, that is the initial marker you've got to find your way over, and that is a very impressive marker to be laid down by John Lauzon. And well, the unluckiest man in the middle of the pack Racing League series, it could be said, with the fact he does seem to find the bad luck of finding it in spades from season to season. But one thing I can tell you is his fortunes are turning up so far, and he's enjoyed some brilliant battles in the last couple of rounds, and therefore his luck really is turning, and it's wonderful to see, to be honest, because I can imagine for many it would be a case that after all the misfortune they've had over what has been the best part of the last 3 to 4 seasons of the middle of the pack Racing League, dating back into 2024, many at that point would have given up, but not this man, not John Lauzon. He seems to have this desire just to push on, and it is a desire which I think many can learn from as he heads in towards what is turn number 8 there, and Exton out right now. Well, what can he do on this second flying lap? That is the question, as it's for Onofre as he heads towards the timeline. He has gone purple in what has been the last sector of this lap, by looks of things, and as he comes across the timeline, he does improve. That's the 36.690, so he does slash the deficit to pole down by a couple of attempts, but not by that much. Tigert improves, but stays P14. Julian Jones on an outlap after a spin coming out of turn number 3 that was slightly off camera only moments ago. Meanwhile, what about James Logston? Can he improve here? He has improved in sectors 2 and 4, the subsectors, as he heads across the timeline. That moves into P5, but Logston seems to be struggling a little bit here. Meanwhile, John Lauzon comes towards the timeline, does not improve either, so therefore Lauzon, he almost matches his first flying lap, so I think Lauzon decided to invest everything into a single flying lap, and that makes sense, to be fair, given the relative conditions that we are seeing here today, in the fact that we've got a very hot circuit, very hot ambient temperature as well, as would be expected potentially for the time of year they're racing, and therefore it does mean that the first flying lap could be just as valuable as the final flying lap, in the fact these tyres may already be starting to head towards their proverbial cliff as he heads down towards turn number 6. Onto the brakes they go, and you can see how the front of the car completely pitches forward, all the weight coming forward there for the front engine rear wheel drive machine. This Toyota GR86 powered by its wonderful 2.4 litre boxer engine, with the car being manufactured by Toyota, but for a collaboration effort between Toyota and Subaru, at least for the GR86 that's on the road. Although there are rumours for the next rendition of the GR86 Toyota that we are going to see it be a purely Toyota project, and it is going to be a Toyota engine that moves away from what is the 2.4 litre boxer engine and more towards what could be potentially a 4 or even 3-cylinder Toyota engine instead. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But meanwhile, as he makes his way in towards turn number 9, well, we had a couple of drivers coming to the pit lane, and Offred's into the pits, Jones is into the pits. They don't feel as though they can improve any further. Logston, meanwhile, this is going to be his penultimate qualifying lap that he comes to the close of, as Tigert moves up to P12, Bryce moves up to P11, so they're finding some late time, but both are 37.8, separated by only 300ths off camera. But Logston comes to the timeline this time, moves up to P2 of a very quick final sector of 36.634. John Lauzon, meanwhile, does not improve, but let's ride on board then for his final flying lap of this qualifying session, and Lauzon, the man who needs to make sure he qualifies ahead of Logston, as Logston backs off, and Lauzon decides to back back off as well. So he sees that Logston has pulled the pin, and as a result, Lauzon says, okay, I don't need to do anything more because my rival has called it in already. Well, that is going to be a big grin on the face of John Lauzon. And well, meanwhile, with Logston deciding to park up their starting P2, of course, qualifying is just one part of the story, and I suspect the bigger story is going to be in the race. It'll be an absolutely merciless race between the two of them if Charlotte's anything to go by last week's round. But meanwhile, we've still got the ITD West machines there of what is Zahair, Bryce and Tigger all out. They are on their final qualifying lap. They are allowed to finish this lap, given the fact we are in overtime now with 15 minutes having passed, and you see from the top centre of your screen. I tell you, as they make the way on through, all three drivers here still trying to find some time out there, and characteristically towards the bottom end, if not outside the top 10. This is not normally where they like to qualify, and well, as they make the way on through turn number 9, perhaps a circuit that's just outwitting and outfoxing some of our drivers. Indeed, it has proven to be one of those circuits across the globe on an international scale in real life and sim racing, whereby Road Course Ale, the original infield circuit at Homestead-Miami, has not been the easiest to conquer. And as the Hare heads towards the timeline, what's he going to do? Is he going to improve from P9? And yes, he gets ahead of Wilman da Costa, and Tom Bryce leaves it all to a last gasp. It's a 37.409, and Bryce moves to P7. So ITD West gets some improvements on the board right at the end of the session, but it's been a challenging session for the team, albeit Jones a P4. He'll be happy with that, but I know there's more progress to be made in the race, and we'll have to wait to see how it plays out for the ITD West teams, given they've got that freeway fight for P2 between them, plus also Sunday GT Turtles. But qualifying does come to a close then, and with that, as we can see, it is an overall pole position subject to automated track limit stewarding confirmation, an overall pole position and pro pole position for John Lauzon. And meanwhile, in where's the AM class, it's P5 overall, but pole position in the AM class to Nick Bader ahead of Blake Phillips, and they will share the third row together as the circuit falls silent for a brief period. And that silence is a prime opportunity for us to grab a quick glass of water, or indeed you guys and girls at home to grab a quick drink before we do go to the grid. And with qualifying complete, one of the interesting bits of analysis we can do here is to talk a little bit about John Lauzon's pole lap. And in fact, 4 tenths faster than Logston, and it's the biggest margin we've seen an overall pole position taken by in recent rounds, if my memory serves me correctly. So therefore, Lauzon really laying down a marker, but the problem is here, given the stop-start nature of the circuit and the fact we've got multiple long straights, being on pole isn't always the best place to be, and indeed the slipstream could be a major element, and James Logston will be a big beneficiary of what is running in that toe. But we'll have to wait and see if that's how it plays out, as qualifying does come to its official closure then, ladies and gentlemen, and then we're just waiting for our drivers to head to the grid. And as they make their way onto the grid, this is how they'll line up for round 7 of 8 in the Winter GR86 Championship for 2025, brought to you on iRacing and powered by the Middle of the Pack Racing League. And it's John Lauzon who has taken overall pole position by almost 4 attempts over James Logston. The Bear Pope Zero Dry is followed up on the second row by Edwin Offrey and Julian Jones for the IT West Interns Pro Esports Division driver, putting in a brilliant opening qualifying lap for his bank account, and that's what he's taken P4 with. And pole position goes the way to P5 overall driver Nick Bader ahead of Blake Phillips for the Pit Club Sim Racing, and then behind them on row number 4, starting P7, it's Tom Bryce for IT West Interns Pro Esports Division and Roger Ganesh for Sunday GT Turtles. Completing the top 10 will be Shahi Zahair for IT West Senior Vice President and Billman da Costa for Bear Pope Zero. And then we have starting P11 the AM driver Mark Senegal Best the Rest for Sunday GT Turtles ahead of Aaron Tiggett the Privateer. And then on the row at number 7, it's Carl Peterson for Caboose Crew and Glenn Bratton at P14 the Privateer ahead of George Louise to complete the qualifying order. But that is the qualifying order set, ladies and gentlemen. All 15 of our drivers in position on the grid, and the lights are on. And can John Lauzon lead into turn number 1? Well, without further ado, it is going to be for the 7th time this season. Lights out and away we go as 30 minutes of racing get underway, and John Lauzon looks to get a good start there versus James Logston as they roar their way down in towards turn number 1. But as they come on down in towards that opening braking zone, where it's going to be turn number 2, where it all plays out. It looks like it's a good start from Lauzon, as meanwhile you can see that Edwin Offrey to hold on as Blake Phillips goes a little bit deep. Change there for Shahi Zahair versus Tom Bryce, gets up the inside of Bryce immediately, and as they all make their way 2 by 2 here in the mid-pack, well, George Louise, who starts on the back of the field, is going to try and pick his way past Tiggett first and foremost, with Tiggett losing 2 places over the starting line. Out of turn 3 and 4 they go in towards 5, and see Louise immediately now looking for the opportunity to try and go round the outside in towards the turn 6 hairpin as they drag race the way on through. But meanwhile, that's Phillips at the inside of Bader. Bader's had a very slow run out of the opening 5 corners, and Phillips gets ahead after that poor run through turn number 2, almost saw him run wide, but then has come back. So Blake Phillips back on the attack, and Bader being made to fall behind. Shahi's there also an element in the picture, and off screen we've had George Louise move up into P14 as Bader now looking up the inside immediately but can't quite find it. We look to George Louise, he looks to battle his way onto the inside, goes all on the brakes, and well, wouldn't be surprised if the number 10 driver makes some very quick progress up through this field. Plus it's Glenn Bratton there for P13, and now onto the backstretch they go. And as they make the way up onto that said backstretch, well, meanwhile we look to the front of the field. It's John Lauzon who holds on here with James Logston right behind, as we do say hello to the father of James Logston, Eric Logston, there in the YouTube chat. Says it's race time, and indeed a perfect time to join us, Eric, and glad to have you with us. And we do see Lauzon leading as he comes out of the chicane for the first time to complete the opening lap. So 1 lap down and plenty to go over the 30-minute distance, and it's Lauzon who leads ahead of Logston at P2. Onofre sits in P3 right in the back of Logston, followed up by Jones at P4, a further second behind. Then it's your leader Phillips P5 ahead of Bader, followed by Zuhair. Then we have Senegal at P8 ahead of Bryce, and then it's Ganesh completing your top 10 with Peterson at P11 best of rest, as all drivers now start to settle down into what is a line of stern formation here. We're in the way on through, although saying that, we look back to the leaders here, and in fact look back over the rear of your race leaders. He tries to hold off the charge of Logston and Onofre, and you can see the top 5 starting to spread out, with the top 3 pulling away from Jones and Phillips. But here we go then. Will Logston look for a move here? No, he decides to back off in towards the turn 6 hairpin this time around, and I think right now playing the game of let's just simply push each other forward as Lauzon goes very deep. A bit of pressure building on Lauzon already. He's got to settle himself down here. So here comes Onofre. So the fact that Logston got bunched up behind Lauzon, it's going to give Onofre a huge run as they head in towards the hairpin at turn number 8. But will there be an opportunity here for Onofre to go around the outside? Well, Logston's got himself firmly positioned on the inside. Onofre trying to look for the cutback run, but he can't quite find it, and Lauzon just immediately getting his 2 rivals to fight each other. Could we have a repeat here of what was at Phoenix Raceway, albeit without the instant, and therefore we could see a freeway fight run the whole distance of the race, when we'd love to see it as they make the way in towards turn number 9. You can see Onofre, they're running a little bit deeper into the corner, trying to open up the corner more and also offset the dirty air on entry. But these drivers all pushed each other to the absolute maximum from the off. Further back, we've got George Louise and Aaron Tigger going side by side into turn 9. Tigger on the inside. Louise gives him the space to breathe and backs off there. And well, the number 86 driver being given the opportunity to come and through. But Costa will be the next target. And afterwards, that great entrance qualify. Oh, goodness me, hold the phone. Oh, my lord. And that is a very nasty 180-degree spin there for what was Aaron Tigger, who went over the top of what was the apex curb and indeed the mini tyre barrier, and was turn number 12. And the suspension of that 86 Toyota right now is going to be absolutely in a state of worse to wear. But meanwhile, coming back to your leaders from what was a big moment there for Aaron Tigger. We'll get an onboard replay of that very shortly, as the car right now is being repaired in the pit lane. You had to use that fast repair with immediate effect, as otherwise that car is going to have to be retired, we suspect. Well, meanwhile, John Lauzon holding on here with Logston off a little bit further back this time. Meanwhile, Blake Phillips all over the back of Jones, albeit Bader's just watching and rubbing his hands together behind, I think, thinking, you know what, if he just keeps pushing Jones right now, I'm going to have all the tyre life left at the second half of the race to go hunting. And that's not a bad place to be if your name's Nick Bader, in the fact that you can just force your rival to have to use all his tyres nice and early. But then again, we'll have to wait and see whether we would have Phillips find a way past Jones. Well, that's the question that we'll find out with time, whether it's a possibility. And see, they're riding the apex curb of the turn 8 hairpin very comfortably, as Phillips really locking in on those left-hand side tyres and just pulling the car around the corner, albeit it does look as though at the moment Jones is just able to stay ahead by hair's whisker as they come in towards turn number 9. But behind them, Bader and Zahair are queuing up, so we are starting to get a bit of a closer battle here. And indeed, the battle for lead is contested by 3 cars, and the battle for P4 is being contested by 4 cars. Roger Ganesh a bit further back, battling with Tom Bryce, so what is P9, trying to look for the move there as they snake their way from what is left to right and then back to left-hander again. Very tricky to stay very close to your rival, but it's going to be a good exit out of turn number 12 there for Ganesh. He's going to look for the inside here into turn number 1. The number 72 of Bryce will leave the door open. The 229 goes all in, and it's going to be a daring move for Ganesh. Can he keep it close to the wall? Just about. Yes, he does on that pit wall exit, and it's going to be a move up the inside to move to P9 for Roger Ganesh. Doesn't gain a name place, but gains an overall position, and Bryce falls back to P10. But as they come to settle the differences for a brief moment, George Louise and Glenn Bratton continue to fight, albeit Louise has got back ahead of Bratton in recent battling, and therefore back up into P13. But from them looking back up towards the race leaders, well, right now it's deja vu. You would imagine that we're looking back at the opening lap and indeed the last couple of laps, but now we're looking at lap number 4, I can assure you, and Lauzon still keeping Logston absolutely glued up behind him, and well, I should really say Logsdon glued to the back of Lauzon. I think these two trying to push each other along and trying to break away from Onofre, but Onofre is going nowhere, and with only 1.5 seconds to Jones in P4, who's bringing a pack of 4 cars up with him. Well, you would imagine right now that these leaders, I think, are having to do a bit of a toss and turn in their minds as to whether they want to fight each other, or alternatively whether they want to not fight each other and make sure they don't end up making a 7-way fight for victory. Of course, we would love to see that, but I get the feeling they would love to have their squabble between each other where possible. Ideally, no squabble at all. Lauzon would love to be seconds off in the distance, but right now I think he'll take the better of the two worst-case scenarios as he comes in towards turn number 10. But as he does so, we need to take a replay of what happened to Aaron Tiggott only moments ago coming on through the chicane. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, here is the replay. Courtesy of Arturo Mayorga, we get this replay, and there it was just a big snap loose on the rear of the car, and just unfortunately going around. It didn't look as though it was tapped into the corner, at least from the camera perspective. You can see where the front left suspension completely dropped away as a result of that clattering of the suspension over the apex curb, and that really was the story of the race for Aaron Tiggott before the fast repair. But let's return to your live racing action. So as we return to all the race, and indeed it doesn't stop as our drivers continue the way on through on lap number 5 here, and still plenty more laps to come as they make the way on through. We do apologise for the fact the stopwatch in the top centre of your screen now has set itself back by a couple of minutes, so therefore we will keep you updated on the approximate number of laps that we are expecting, and we'll give you a figure on that very shortly, ladies and gentlemen. Bit of a glitch for our technical information. As meanwhile, as soon as we take a moment to look further down the order, that is a big round for Julian Jones, and Jones going around drops him all the way from what was a rather happy at that time P4, and that puts him all the way down to P9. So Blake Phillips now moves up to P4, and well, can we find out exactly what happened there to Jones? I think we might be able to get a replay of that in short order, but Jones there definitely with a big moment, and as a result releasing the places. And in fact, we won't be able to get a replay of that because we just came back to it, back to live action, so therefore we're going to have to wonder what happened to Jones. But until you're not a happy moment, I suspect, just coming down the gearbox a bit too aggressively, and in the end the rear of the car just completely letting go as our drivers make the way into the second half of this current lap. But as they do, for Julian Jones, an absolutely hair-raising moment, and not a moment which he wanted to be a part of, wanted to have happen to him. But as we look from what was our driver who was running P4 to a driver who is still running as your race leader, well, Lauzon under that pressure, and we look back to what is your third place man who's trying to factor his way into this fight, run on board with Edwin Onofre, and as they bounce their way over the apex curve of turn number 2, Onofre here just continues to play the long-term waiting game, a game of patience here, and really playing chess where his rivals might be playing checkers by comparison, in the fact that he's thinking about how he can move all his pieces into the board to try and take the victory and take the places off of both of them in one fell swoop. As meanwhile, fastest lap of the race goes to Glenn Bratton this time around, so Bratton starting to pick up the pace as the drivers make the way on through. But it does look as though that tyre life now is starting to mature, and those lap times are continuing to be fed on in, and indeed the rubber wears on down here at Homestead-Miami. The drivers continue to charge on here. Well, we can see Lauzon going a bit defensive there as they head on down into the braking zone. Will there be a move around the outside from Logsdon? He's going to try for it here is Logsdon. It's a long way around the outside. Lauzon gives him the space to breathe, and Onofre here not close enough to really get involved. But you can see that inside line into the hairpin is so critical to enable you to have the defense. But of course, on an inside line on the exit, you can't open up the steering as much, therefore you lose the exit speed, which Logsdon is allowed to take. But Onofre with a double draft here as they head in towards turn number 9. You can see a little bit of snaking from side to side there from Lauzon. He's allowed to do that, I think, trying to settle the weight transfer of the car down from what's that move to the right to then turn into left-hander at turn number 9. Of course, the later you leave it to open up your entry into turn 9, the more unstable the car gets, and that's where we can see things go wrong for drivers when they're making those very quick-fire direction changes, because these Toyota GR86s, they're lightweight cars, weighing to the best part of what is about 1.4 tons, metric tons that is, and therefore it does mean that these cars, they've got a bit of weight to shake around, even though they've had the majority of the interior stripped out, but quite close to the road car. Otherwise, they make the way through turn number 3 in towards 4-5, and Onofre just waiting here in the wings as the wipers go on to collect some dirt off his windscreen from the battling in front. And Onofre here definitely playing the long-term patience game. As they make the way in towards what will be at the hairpin. Well, further back, we have had a change of position. So Shahi Zahir has got ahead of what is Blake Phillips. In fact, here comes Nick Bader looking to go around the outside in towards turn at number 6. On the brakes they go. Phillips is still there. Bader going all the way round, but Phillips will have that inside line. He'll get him back head by nose initially, but then the kink of 7 will be where the differences start to occur, because Bader can get the throttle down a bit more confidently by comparison. That's going to put him on the inside in turn on the switchback run in towards the turn 8 hairpin. And I think this is going the way of one driver, and Nick Bader does get ahead of Blake Phillips, and Phillips had that lightning start by comparison with Bader. Will in at the end now has found his way ahead, has Bader, but as they make the way up onto the banking, can Phillips come back at him now? Well, that is going to be something he'll be hoping to do here into turn number 9, but it could be a quick back and forth between these two as they push each other along. And we've got the distant camera view there. As you can see, Zahair already started to break away. We're really turning it up to 11 is Shahi Zahair, but meanwhile Blake Phillips being made to wait behind his championship rival, and he won't want to finish behind Bader at the end of this round, because if he does so, it's not going to give Bader the championship crown around early, but it does mean that Phillips is going to have to go even the greater distance. We see a big slide there upwards of the banking from Bader as the rear of the car just jutting out as he transferred from the flat road surface to the raised road surface, or the cambered road surface, and we'll have to be careful about that one because it really does kick the rear right of the car around. And coming down into turns 1 and 2 this time, Bader under huge pressure from Phillips, and Phillips doing everything he can, throwing himself at this. They headed turn 3, but to no avail at the moment. But the more pressure he puts on, as long as he can maintain this pressure, he may create himself an opening versus his rival in the 276. But right now the 225 of Phillips has to wait his turn, and I think we can get very shortly a replay as exactly how this all started for what was a Blake Phillips. And here is the quick replay to explain the story, ladies and gentlemen, as to what happened to Blake Phillips. Now Shahi Zahair got ahead. Now, this was only months ago, coming down to turns 1 and 2, and Phillips in the end went deep. It happened to him on lap 1 at the start of the race, but this time Phillips going much wider than planned. Shahi got up the inside and then out of momentum and out of sorts through 3 and in towards 4. Bader opted then to go round the outside and got the momentum out of 4 into 5, and that's how the entire chain of battling started and ended at what was turn at number 8, with Nick Bader taking up that position at long last. As we do now, we'll go back to your live racing pictures. And as we do return to the racing action as we left it, well, here we are with what is your race leaders again now as they weave and wind their way through the chicane. Here on lap number 8, the lap times continue to trickle upwards, but it's a poor run out of turn 12 from now on. Here comes Logston then, looking up the inside as they make the way into turn 1. On to lap number 9 they go, and it's going to be Logston who takes the lead shortly into the opening corner as an off-road tries to play a role in this, but he can't. But James Logston, the Bear Pope Zero machine in the 42, gets it stopped on a dime there into turn number 2 and takes the lead this race from John Lauzon. Now, that's not to say Lauzon's not going to come back at any point, but I can imagine now the mental pressure will be back on John Lauzon to try and find a way back at Logston. But the problem will be here is now Edwin Offer will be looking at this thinking, you know what, I may just be able to get involved in this myself and start to become a much bigger player in this battle as they head down towards turn number 6. And of course it could lead to a bit of a stalemate between these 3, whereby if Lauzon's got to do as much defending as he has attacking, then he may never quite be able to get back into the fight. Now, doing some quick mathematics, we reckon we're going to be doing approximately 19 laps here for our drivers today, so therefore keep your eyes on the lap count on the top centre of your screen rather than the timer, which does seem to be a little bit erroneous. But right now those laps will continue to trickle upwards, and as they do, time will gradually run out as our drivers head towards the midway point of this race. But you can see that Lauzon having a poor run coming out of the turn 8 hairpin, and now Onofre in a prime position to think about attacking. But of course the problem is, the closer he gets, well, he'll have a greater opportunity to attack, but will that batting just enable Logston to run away once they come down in towards turn number 9 and in towards 10? 3 great drivers, like you say, Eric, in the YouTube chat, and I can tell you one thing, all 3 of them here with great racing respect for one another, and 3 huge stars, and I believe all 3 on the grid as well last year in the 2024 Toyota Gazoo Racing North America GT World Challenge official esports cup, and I believe 2 of them in the form of John Lauzon and Edwin Offre in the 2025 rendition, which starts in approximately 10 minutes time in terms of live broadcast. So as soon as this race finishes, we would encourage you to go over to that, check it out on the GT World Challenge America YouTube channel to see how they get on, because as soon as the racing finishes here today, they'll pretty much be racing a live time in what will be the season opener of the 2025 Championship. So therefore, all these drivers absolutely established individuals in what was the GR86 machine, and we're seeing it here today in the middle of the pack racing league, and we've seen it elsewhere as well. But as they roll their way down towards what is turn number 6, well, right now could not be closer, and Logston is being gifted a little bit of breathing room, as meanwhile swap a position here further down the order. That is Jones getting ahead of Bryce. Tom Bryce losing out there on the exit of what is turns 4 through to 5, and Jones sneaking ahead. But then again, that might be a bit of a team tactical decision in the fact that Jones was running in P4 in the early stage of this race, but a big error or incident at what was turn number 6 saw Jones pointing in the wrong direction, and he's had to recover since then. But meanwhile, we come back up to P4, and that's Nick Bader on the inside there of Shahi Zahir at the prime time as they make the way on and through the corner. And as they do so, will Bader getting the better run out of turn 6 and 7. It moves into P4, and now Zahir will try and come back at him as they make the way onto the back stretch. Blake Phillips now only what is half a second behind, I should say. Obviously be a lot closer, and right now Phillips will be watching this and thinking, okay, how can I use this to my advantage? And well, the answer will surely be he's just got to think about how he can get involved in that fight. As meanwhile, looking at my content booth window, we've got George Louise into the pit lane, already a lap down for an instant earlier on. I think he's having a bit of a difficult day in the office, and they're going to take a look at that car because I think there's some damage to the car. But here comes Phillips then, looking up the inside of Zahir, coming across the timeline to go into lap 11. Very nice and tight on the inside there, gets very close to the pit wall, the pit exit wall there just on his left hand side. And Phillips takes a dive to the inside through turn 2, almost slides wide there. You can see the car drifting away from him as he came off the apex curve at turn number 2, but gets it stopped just about the corner that cost him the lead of the AM class. Only a couple of laps to go, but it doesn't cost him. One is P5 overall, and he makes that move count. A lovely move there from Blake Phillips, but Zahir's not done yet, surely, as they now make the way on through. We'll hold up a second as we've got a change of position there between Jones and what is Ganesh for P7, and the Sunday GT Turtles driver falls behind the IT West machine of Jones as they head in towards the turn 6 hairpin. So it's all change of foot wherever you look inside this top 10 at the moment, and I believe we may be able to get a quick replay of exactly how Jones made that move. And in fact, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, here is the replay. Now, this was only moments ago into turn 3 on the exit of 2. It does look as though a bit too much momentum there for Ganesh. Goes deep into 3, holds the inside into 4. Brilliant defensive driving from the AM driver. But in the end, Jones using his prior experience there to know where the grip is on the outside of turn 4 and just able to steam his way on through. And as we do return to your live racing pictures, we'll still plenty more laps to tick up here as our drivers push onwards beyond the halfway point of the race right now. More laps to come. We're expecting a grand total of 19 laps based on the 30 minutes and the lap times they are setting. And back to our race leader then, James Logston, still leading this race by an advantage that has not grown. John Lauzon right there with him after making that move only moments ago into turn number 1 about 4 laps ago. He's not letting it go just yet, but this top 3 staying together. Meanwhile, in the battle for P5, Shahi back on the inside, essentially doing a rinse and repeat of the move that Phillips did on him. Only a lap ago, as you see a flash of the brake lights there, full on braking hard on the anchors, triggering almost the ABS on the brakes. Remember, this fixed setup brought up in the Middle Pack Racing League has seen the entire traction control system of these cars turned off, and they do have a very limited amount of anti-lock braking system or ABS active compared to the standard ABS that would normally be raced on these cars. So therefore, it does mean that these cars do require a lot of brake modulation, and they require ultimate throttle modulation for the drivers, because whilst they only pack about 220 horsepower, that's brake horsepower under that engine, the front engine, it is a car whereby when you light up those rear tyres, it can very quickly go around if you're not careful, given the fact that this car runs on a very slim set of tyres compared to other racing cars of its class. And as they make the way down towards turn at number 8, will Phillips close, but not able to get back as ahead this time, and that is gradually giving Nick Bader the opportunity to sneak away little by little as Roger Ganesh there gets very adventurous looking around the outside of Julian Jones for P7. So we've got AM drivers and pro drivers absolutely going hammer and tongs against each other, something we absolutely love to see, and that's why in the Middle of the Pack Racing League you will find no finer series to see overall race battles whereby everybody is encouraged to fight each other, because the more places you take, the more points you will earn, not just overall but also in your class. But as we do see Ganesh getting very close there, no way through at this time around. He's going to look to the inside of the chicane of turn 11. Well, that is not a move that you typically go for, but I can see what Ganesh is trying to do. He's trying to put mental pressure onto Jones to make Jones think a move is coming that's not possible. Albeit Jones, again, has seen that one before and decides to just take my racing line to the end of the day. If I do get biffed on the inside there, it's going to be on Ganesh when it goes to the stewards. So Ganesh really right now trying to get into Jones's head, and Jones is simply saying, I've seen it all. You're going to have to try something I haven't seen before, because right now I'm reading the book of overtakes, Homestead-Miami, and that's another one I can tick off the book. But meanwhile, as they make the way onto this lap, halfway through lap already is Logston, Lauzon and Offre. These three continue to extend their advantage at the front of the field now. 7.5 seconds between them and Nick Bader in P5. P4, but these three continue to run nose to tail. I don't think since the start of this race they've had more than a second's gap in totality between the trio, and that's how close they are running on pace. You see Lauzon there starting to think a little bit unconventionally. 1 minute tucking in, and the next minute weaving out to the inside of the braking zone for the hairpin, and just trying to find a way to get into Logston's head. And well, as they make the way onwards, and Offred had a small run wide coming out of the hairpin, so that's why he's dropped back by 2 tenths by the looks of things. But as they come in towards turn number 9, well, Logston and Lauzon definitely pushed each other to the limit, and Offred has fallen back a bit further here, but I don't think he's going to fight out contention of this entirely. But right on board and looking back from the rear of the Bear Pope 042 of Logston, well, right now if he can hold track position he'll feel comfortable, but Lauzon's right there with him, and well, as they make the way up into the banking, the car screeches, it grinds its way along, and as they make the way on towards turn number 1, this time it's a lap 14. Laps are running out, and time with it, but still plenty of opportunities here, as Logston just holds that lead position through 1 in towards 2. You see how close Lauzon's getting there as they make the way through, but as close as he might get, unless he can get alongside, he can't get any closer, and right now just having to wait his turn and wait for that prime opportunity. But laps are gradually running out here, because we will have after this one will be a grand total another 5 laps, on the basis there'll be 19 laps in racing if my mental maths is correct, and our drivers right now are pushing it to the absolute limit to see who is going to be the winner overall in the pro class. But right now it's looking as though Logston, whereas at Charlotte he left it all to the very end of the race to make the move, he's made it quite early today, and it looks as though he might just be making that move stick as they head up towards where's the turn 8 hairpin for the 14th time of asking. Going on past our static camera there, that long panning view giving you an idea of the speed they pick up on the run down that infield stretch before they make the way into that breakage over the hairpin. Lauzon runs wide, and that is an uncharacteristic error, and one that's been unenforced, and for Lauzon that could be an error that leaves him more vulnerable now to an off-rare looking to make a move on the run in towards turn number 9, but in fact it just spreads the gap out more evenly between all 3 drives. All 3 separated there by 4 tenths from car to car coming in towards turns 9 and 10. But immediately Lauzon closes back up once again. So right now absolutely determined to try and find a way to force the move to happen here as they head out of turn number 12 and up onto the rise they go. But powering their way along then, well, it's Lauzon who's close. But right now Onofre right behind there just watching. Lauzon's going to be in the position to look around the outside. Will he go for the move here to turn 1? He thinks about it. He's going to set himself up for the outside into 2. Lauzon goes all the way around, but meanwhile Logston goes defensive but goes a little bit too deep on the commitment, and as a result it will be Lauzon who gets the cutback run, but just not enough to get himself alongside into 3, so therefore has to pull back out and fall back into P2 for now. But Lauzon started to get a little bit more adventurous here in terms of the move he's trying to pull. Meanwhile Nick Bader versus Shahi Zahair, and Zahair here on the rise to try and take P4 off of the AM leader, and in fact he will do so, and in doing so I think he's now going to open up an opportunity. Meanwhile we've got to come back to the front of the field because Logston's having to defend versus Lauzon, who's trying to go all the way around the outside. It's a long way around the outside, but it puts you on the inside into turn 8, as we saw from Bader versus Zuhair, what was 6 laps ago. And as they make the way on down, well, Lauzon right now defending in the middle of the road, Logston on the outside, and Offred places his bets behind Lauzon, but backs off there, not wanting to get too involved. And as they make the way on through, well, Lauzon in the end retakes the lead of this race. He'll put one more lap onto the board, surely, which he's led, or will he, as it's going to be Logston now, who looks around the outside, down the back stretch. We yet see 2 drivers go too wide into turn number 9 in full force, but they're going to do so now, and it's going to get very close between the 2 of them as Lauzon there just gives enough breathing room for Logston to try and go for it. Around the outside of turn 10 he goes, and Logston is going to retake the lead of this race. Onofre tries to get into the inside of turn 11, can't quite find it, and James Logston, well, my goodness, that is some absolute commitment, but also some absolutely beautiful and respectful racing between the pair. But James Logston retakes the lead at the end of lap number 15, going on to the 16, but what a way to do it, going around the outside of turns 9 and 10, and then in the end calling Lauzon's bluff, which is to just simply keep its car there all the way through the sequence of corners, and Onofre is right back there with them now as they make the way through turns 3, 4 and 5. Further back we can see that Zuhair still holding on to P4 with Bader and Phillips getting very close to each other, and Phillips is going to look up the inside here into turn 3. It's going to get very testy between these 2, but Bader's not quite able to find the move this time around as they make the way through, and neither is Phillips here, so these 2 absolutely absolutely throwing everything at this with each other and also try and take on Shahi Zahair. And it looks so right now, Bader's got to make a decision. Does he want to fight Zahair or does he want to keep Phillips behind? He can't do both. Indeed, you can't do both in racing for the simple reason. If you try to do both, you end up compromising your line and opening yourself up to even more vulnerabilities. But he's got to make that call. And I think his call right now is to make sure that Phillips does not get close enough behind in order to make the move. So he's going to relentlessly chase after Zahair here. And when doing so, he's going to pull out and look to the inside into turn 8. So Bader's going all in here. He's going to throw all his cards on the table and does so. And Zahair sees it coming and lets it go there. Not able to put up the defence he wanted to. But meanwhile, coming from them as Bader moves back into P4. And I think Zahair playing the bigger picture there in that fight. Well, right now, Lauzon again looking for a move in towards turns 9 and 10. Can't quite find it as we jump on board with your second place man, who right now is trying to find one way to take what would be the lion's share of points here today by taking victory. He needs this victory in order to give himself the prime opportunity in order to take the crown. In fact, I think he's got a slowdown penalty because Lauzon's going slowly. He drops to P3 and it's a late slowdown here that puts Lauzon to the bottom end of the podium and puts him potentially out of contention for what is the lead battle. Because as we go on to lap 17, Shahi Zahair gets back at Bader on the start for this stretch. Into turns 1 and 2 they go, and as they make the way on for the left-handers of 1 and 2, well, right now, Zahair holds on for the time being, but I would imagine that Bader and Phillips will be absolutely eager to try and prove something different as we jump on board with what is your 6th place driver, 2nd place in the AM class to Bader, who's right in front of him. This is Blake Phillips in the 225, coming out of turn 4 and in towards 5 right now. Well, what can he do here? Because Bader seems to be the fastest of the two drivers when he's left to his own devices, but Phillips in turn not willing to let Bader have the show entirely his way as they go onto the brakes, and we'll get him very close there, but in the end coming a little bit too hot, and in fact having to stop the car a bit excessively did Phillips there. I think just carrying a bit too much momentum for the corner, and that is going to enable Bader just to simply careen onto the back of Zahair. Zahair's going to go defensive, but Bader's going to look as tight as possible here into turn 8 hairpin, and Phillips right now be thinking, why can't I be closer? But there goes Bader in all in the inside as Zahair gives himself the room to cut back, but Bader sees it coming and parks the car on apex there. Bader right now, he may be IM Championship leader, but he's got an absolutely pro performance. Indeed, Phillips is doing the same as well, and as they make the way onto the back stretch, well, Bader right now, he's going to have Zahair on the inside here. He's going to try and defend on the outside into turn 9. We'll see overtakes on the outside, but not defences. This is going to be some brave stuff, but Bader's going to get ahead as the break is over turn 10, and in Zahair just doesn't have the confidence on that inside line to outbrake his rival, so we'll have to wait. But it's a lovely bit of defensive drive from Nick Bader, just simply having the confidence in the car, and well, that will now enable Blake Phillips to get close to Zahair for P5 as they go on to the penultimate lap of racing here today in the US state of Florida. The front drives battling at the mid portion of the top 10. We come to the very front of the field, and this is a late charge made by Onofre, who looks to try and look for a cheeky peek up the inside into turn 4, but it's nothing more than that. It's just a peek, and right now James Logsdon is finding every which way to hold on to this position, and well, as he makes his way down towards turn number 6 once more, well, right now Onofre 3.5 tenths behind, Lauzon a further 3.5 tenths back of Onofre. We're back to how we were, except Onofre and Lauzon have swapped places since the last time we talked about the gaps being equidistant, and goodness me, if this battling keeps up, I don't know what's going to hold on. What is this battle or dirty my voice? One of the two is going to win, and as they make the way in towards turn number 8 right now, brilliant racer between them. Lauzon there having a look to the inside, and I think just trying to bleed off some excess speed from the double draft, where he comes into the braking zone for turn number 8. And I would imagine the tyres on these cars now are going to be quite significantly worn down compared to where they were at the start today, and that might be starting to have a bit of an influencing factor in the types of moves that they're looking to commit to, albeit we are due one more lap after this one, and therefore for Logsdon at least, it's all going to be about holding on for the very last time. As you can see, Onofre now really is trying to enact what Lauzon was trying to do earlier, but Onofre has saved everything up for these last couple of laps. But then here we go, ladies and gentlemen, there's a big wobble there for Onofre as they make the way up into the banking. Here we go then, one last time as the white flag is out. It's time for lap 19 and 19, and as they make the way across that timeline, Onofre going to go a bit defensive there versus Lauzon. He's going to look up to the inside immediately, and Lauzon knows he needs this move in order to keep the championship alive going into Indianapolis, and he goes all in, but Logsdon as a result is gifted a lot of breathing room here as they make the way through turn 3 and in towards 4. Well, here they come then, this top 3. Lauzon does get ahead in an absolutely do or die move, but he's made made it count. Onofre in the end, seeing it coming, tried to defend as hard as possible, but he won't be able to stop a determined charge from Lauzon like that. And in the end, Lauzon back into P2, but at what cost? And the answer is, it's now 8 attempts before his championship leader and rival of Logsdon, and whether he can close that 8 attempts down or not, I think it's going to come down more to Logsdon making a mistake than Lauzon pulling off one-lap magic. Although saying that, we have seen some one-lap magic from drivers in the past, including Lauzon, and we'll go in defence here as they make the way onto what is turn number 8. Here comes Onofre looking up the inside. Lauzon hasn't covered this off in time, so Onofre is going to go all in, but Lauzon knows there's a lot of grip on the outside line if you can tame it, and in the end it's a little squeeze there on Onofre, but Onofre's given the room to comply, and Lauzon in the end giving his rival the bare minimum, showing that it's just enough respect as they make the way onto the back stretch. And as they come on through then, well, this lap is coming down to fine margins, but as they roar their way in towards turn number 9, it looks as though at this point in the top 3 things might be settling down to a degree of certainty, because Lauzon is able to keep Onofre behind him in the fight for the runner-up spot. But the thing is, right now, the one thing that's running away from his race victory, because he comes up through the last 2 quarters, he's going to make it a 5th victory of the season, and it will be as the checker flag waves. James Logsdon, who takes victory here at the Homestead-Miami Speedway in round 7 of the championship, ahead of John Lauzon P2. Edwin Onofre rounds off the overall pro podium P3. Meanwhile, for Nick Bader, it's another win on his conquest to the AM Championship as he comes to line P4 overall, and another AM victory ahead of Shahi Zahair P5, runner-up in the AM class Blake Phillips P6, and then it will be Julian Jones at P7 in a frustrating race after an early spin that denied him the opportunity for a chance at a podium. Roger Ganesh, meanwhile, crawling there out of his last couple of quarters. What has happened to Roger Ganesh? He's going very slowly. I think Ganesh has hit what is the apex tyre barrier of turn number 12, and if so, Ganesh is going to lose that place as Bryce moves into P8 ahead of Ganesh, who finishes on the AM podium just about as Carl Peterson P10. Meanwhile, best of the rest, it will be Glenn Bratton, P11, 5th place in the AM class, and then Billman DaCosta will be your last finisher of this race on the lead lap, with Aaron Tigger already finishing his race in what is P13, a lap down. But here it comes then, Billman DaCosta, as he makes his way on through. Another challenging day today after that brilliant qualifying session, really leaving it all to the final qualifying lap to DaCosta. And he did a great job of qualifying in P10, but it all went wrong in the early stage of the race. And for DaCosta, it will be P12 and P6 in the AM cars, and a frustrating end to the day for the Bear Pope Zero driver, who's just not had things go his way the last couple of rounds. But he will be our final finisher. But as he cools on down, as do our leaders, what a race, ladies and gentlemen, and what a battle once again between James Logsdon, John Lauzon, and also Edwin Onofre. We finally got to see the trio fight each other for the entire race distance after being denied it at Phoenix when it all went wrong between Logsdon and Lauzon. But these two today have definitely shown us, alongside Edwin Onofre, what it means to be in a championship battle, and they've absolutely delivered. But for James Logsdon, in taking his 5th win of the season, you would imagine that right now, as he continues his way into the start for this stretch, as the rest of the field makes his way into the pit lane, I can imagine that for James Logsdon, this is going to be something to celebrate. And the fact the championship's not quite wrapped up as far as my mathematics is aware, but he'll be feeling as though this championship is very quickly coming to his hands. He parks up at the start finish line there in celebration of what has been a fantastic performance, and well, what a race. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, as we take a look to the results, subject to any stewards' inquiries, here they are. And as we can see, after a brilliant 19 laps of racing, in the end, James Logsdon, your winner of round 7 of the championship for the Middle of the Pack Racing League Winter GR86 Championship for 2025, brought to you on iRacing. For Bear Pope Zero, winner overall, ahead of John Lauzon by 4 tenths. Edwin Onofre, a further 3 tenths behind, wrapped up the overall podium, and indeed the pro podium as well, with your AM winner Nick Bader, P4 there. And another solid drive, albeit he didn't have it all his own way. Shahi Zahair was one of 2 drivers who kept Bader honest for IT West Senior Vice Presidents, finishing P5. And then you run up in the YAM class as well, Blake Phillips, who after a great start to get into the YAM lead, a small mistake into turn 2 cost him dear, and he never quite got back for it. But enjoyed a brilliant battle between himself and Zahair towards the end of the race, but the Pit Club Sim Racing driver had to settle for 6th. Julian Jones, P7 for IT West Interns Pro Esports Division, ahead of teammate Tom Bryce, and what could have been for Jones stable, never quite know, but we'll know he'll be walking away from today 9. There was a lot left on the table. Roger Ganesh, your 3rd place finish in the AM class of Sunday GT Turtles. Another AM podium there. He's really picking up plenty of those this season. It's great to see. And then Carl Peterson for Caboose Crew wrapping up the top 10. Glenn Bratton finished best of rest P11 ahead of Billman DaCosta, who was your last lead lap finisher for Bear Pope Zero. It was a lap down to Aaron Tiggott, and unfortunately 4 laps down to Sunday GT Turtles Mark Senegal, who I'm hearing had suspension damage as a result of contact with the tyre barrier at turn number 12. It Indeed, a number of drivers falling victim to that today, and I believe he had to come into the pits. But indeed, Mark Senegel still classified as a finisher, as he did finish the race within 5 laps of the race winner. Unfortunately, he'll be classified as a non-finish for George Louise, who in 10 laps down there, the Brazilian privateer, having a difficult day at the races. But coming on to what is the individual class finishing positions. Starting with the pro class, James Logsdon there, picking up the glory of being your pro winner, ahead of John Lawson and Edwin Offrey, who completed the pro podium. And then Shahi Zaher and Julian Jones for ITT West Senior Vice Presidents, the two drivers there, with the West Interns Pro Esports Division, the sub-team there, completing the top 5, and then his teammate Tom Bryce P6, ahead of Aaron Tiggett as a lap down, and your non-finisher of George Louise P8. Coming on to the AM class, 3 bonus points went the way of Nick Bader after 19 laps of racing by 1.5 seconds over the Pit Club Sim Races Blake Phillips, who takes 2 bonus points to second place, and it's an extra point on the cards of Roger Ganesh for Sunday GT Turtles with a 3rd place finish. P4 to Carl Peterson for Caboose Crew ahead of Glenn Bratton, the privateer taking P5 and a bit of a quiet race at the 289. Then your final lead lap finish there, Billman DaCosta for Bear Pope 0 with P7 going the way as classified to Sunday GT Turtles Mark Senegel. But that's the results of the race, ladies and gentlemen, and what a race we've had here today at the Homestead-Miami Speedway in the US state of Florida. Indeed, it has set us up for a fantastic finale at Indianapolis. But at least for the meantime, until we get to round 8 of 8, that's all we've got time for today. And with that, thank you very much for watching. Now, if you'd like to know more about the Middle of the Pack Racing League community in terms of what goes on behind the scenes and how you can be on the grid for a future championship season, well, for all that and plenty more, we do recommend that you take to the Middle of the Pack Racing League Discord. Invite link available on screen. And if you've ever wanted to be part of a sim racing community, one of the premier sim racing communities on iRacing, indeed on the North American continent, but open to anybody around the globe, it doesn't matter where you come from, we could not recommend a more welcoming place. But perhaps you're a little bit shy, or perhaps you're more of a social media person. Well, if you don't want to join the Discord, then we do recommend you head to the Twitter, and that's at twitter.com/MOP Racing. You can stay up to all the latest news and stories within the Middle of the Pack Racing League. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, the story of the Winter GR86 Championship for 2025 is not quite over, because whilst we may have finished all our sprint races as of today, we've got one more round to go. That's right, round 8 of 8 will be our feature race finale at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And on that Saturday, the 29th of March 2025, we'll take a look back of all the racing action as if it were live from the racing on Wednesday, the 26th of March at the Brickyard, where we'll see our champions crowned. In the pro class, it is looking as though it's all heading the way of James Logsdon, and indeed there'll be a need to be a major upheaval for John Lauzon to take the crown, but you never know what can happen. And the same could be said in the AM class with Nick Bader versus Blake Phillips, very much falling on the side of Bader, but you never know what could happen, and could Phillips potentially cause an upset right at the close. And we've also got the Roval Cups to settle, and particularly in the AM class, it will be a showdown between Bader and Roger Ganesh, and who will be taking up that Roval Cup home. And in the pro class, will it simply fall to James Logsdon, or could there be a twist in the tail, much like we saw in the Free Content Cup? Well, for all that and more, you'll need to tune in a week's time. But until then, we've been the Middle of the Pack Racing League. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and most importantly, as well as having a fantastic rest of your weekend, remember to stay on track. Good night.